They laughed when she rolled into the grand ballroom, her silver wheelchair gleaming under the chandeliers. The music softened, conversations faltered, and a hush fell over the young socialites as though the arrival of one uninvited soul could ruin their glittering evening. Elena kept her gaze steady, her spine upright though weak, her hands gently gripping the rims of her wheels. She wasn't here to blend in. She was here because it was her right, though no one knew it yet. The heiress no one expected was sitting among them. The mansion belonged to the Carrington family, America's untouchable dynasty of wealth and power. Their parties made the society columns. Their guests walked red carpets. But what no one knew, not even the Carringtons themselves, was that Elena was one of them. She was the daughter of Charles Carrington, born of a hidden love affair, kept out of sight and tucked away in a modest home by the woman who raised her with dignity, though she had little else. Her mother was gone now, and Elena had spent her life in the shadows, carrying both the weight of her father's silence and the chains of her own broken body. She had never been invited into this world. Tonight, she had invited herself. Whispers began instantly. Who is she? Why a wheelchair? God, how embarrassing! Did someone bring her as a charity case? She must have lost her way. This isn't that kind of event. Elena's cheeks burned, but she forced her lips into the hint of a smile. She had known the laughter would come. She had lived with it since childhood, when neighborhood children mocked her halting speech and fragile movements. Her wheelchair had become both a prison and a throne, depending on how she chose to see it. Tonight, she told herself, it would be a throne. She rolled herself toward the edge of the room, near the buffet table. No one came to greet her. Waiters skirted past as if her presence might stain their trays. Laughter rose again, louder this time, as if the entire hall had collectively decided to treat her as a joke. Elena clenched her fists in her lap. She could have left. She almost did. But then she saw Heiress, the janitor's daughter. Maya had been serving hors d'oeuvre that night, following her father who worked maintenance for the Carrington estate. She was only 16, her apron too big for her small frame, but her dark eyes were bright, alert, and alive. When she noticed Elena sitting alone, she didn't look away. She didn't sneer. Instead, she walked straight across the ballroom floor, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor, and every head turned to see what she was doing. She stopped before Elena, lowered the tray, and bent into the kind of graceful curtsy the debutantes themselves had not managed all evening. Her voice rang clear and proud. "You look like a queen tonight," Maya said, "and queens deserve respect." The laughter stopped. Utter silence swallowed the hall. Elena's throat tightened, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. For the first time in her life, someone had looked past the wheelchair, past the awkwardness, and seen her as she wished to be seen. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some scoffed, rolling their eyes, but others shifted uncomfortably, as though a mirror had been raised to their cruelty. The Carrington patriarch himself, Charles, stepped forward from the dais, his champagne glass in hand. His jaw tightened as he studied the girl in the wheelchair, his eyes betraying something deeper than irritation, something like recognition. Elena held his gaze. And in that gaze, the secret that had lived in her heart for 22 years spilled silently into the room. He knew who she was. And for the first time, so did she. That night did not end in fanfare. It ended in whispers, in angry questions asked behind closed doors, and in one janitor's daughter standing guard by Elena's side as though she were truly protecting royalty. Maya refused to let anyone mock her again. She brushed crumbs from Elena's gown, refilled her water glass, and whispered jokes that made Elena laugh until her sides hurt. By the time midnight came, Elena had discovered something she had never known: a friendship, pure and uncalculated. Over the weeks that followed, the Carrington name began circling around Elena. Some insisted she was an imposter, hungry for inheritance. Others whispered that she bore the striking eyes of Charles Carrington himself. But while lawyers and reporters argued, Maya's friendship became Elena's anchor. The two spent afternoons in the quiet of the estate gardens where Maya's father worked. Maya would push Elena's chair across gravel paths, past fountains and roses, and they would dream aloud about traveling the world, about building schools for children like Elena who had been dismissed, about making spaces where no one had to feel like a shadow. "Why do you stay with me?" Elena asked once, her voice breaking. "Because you're not broken," Maya said. "You're brilliant. And the world is blind. Somebody has to remind them what to see." It was Maya's words that gave Elena strength when Charles finally approached her in a quiet study, with the smell of cigar smoke hanging in the air. He admitted the truth. He had loved her mother. He had abandoned them both. And he had regretted it every day since. But his world of the cold, polished empire he had built had no room for weakness, or so he believed. Elena's voice shook when she answered, "Then your empire is hollow." "Because I'm not weak. I survived everything you ran away from." For a moment, Charles saw her not as the shameful secret he had buried, but as the daughter he had lost. Tears welled in his hardened eyes, and for once, he bowed his head. The Carrington family resisted her. They sneered at her chair, called her a fraud, accused her of manipulation. But every time the voices rose, Maya's voice rose louder. She rallied workers from the estate, people who had seen Elena's kindness firsthand, people who owed nothing to the Carringtons but their wages. One by one, they stood with her. The gardener, the cook, the janitor, ordinary people who saw in Elena not a weakness to hide, but a leader to follow. And slowly, the tide turned. Newspapers began printing her story not as a scandal, but as a triumph. Photographs of Elena in her wheelchair, surrounded by estate workers and a smiling Maya, touched hearts across the country. They called her the heiress of humanity. Donations poured in for the foundation she and Maya had dreamed up, an organization dedicated to children with disabilities, children abandoned by the powerful, children who needed to be seen. The climax came at another ball, 1 year later. This time, Elena was invited. This time, her chair was adorned with silver ribbons, and the chandeliers seemed to shine a little warmer. When she rolled onto the stage to speak, Maya was at her side, holding her hand. Elena's voice trembled at first, but then grew strong. "They laughed at me once. They saw my chair before they saw me. But I am not my wheelchair. I am not my father's mistake. I am proof that worth is not measured by perfection, or wealth, or power. Worth is measured by kindness. And kindness is the only empire that will last." The hall erupted into thunderous applause. Some wept openly. Even her half-siblings, who had once ridiculed her, lowered their heads in shame. Charles himself stood in the crowd, tears rolling down his cheeks, his hand over his heart. Elena looked at Maya, and in her friend's radiant smile, she found the crown she had always longed for. She did not need a throne or a kingdom. She had something far greater, the power of humanity, carried in the simplest, purest act of all. A girl who once carried trays had called her a queen. And in that moment, the world finally saw her as one.